too, just FYI.
Yep.
Yay, we love Bridget.
Thank you.
You are now live.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning. Council called the Park Recreation meeting. It appears that all members are present. Madam Clerk, would you still like the roll call?
Sure. Samples?
Madam,
Here.
Malik?
Here.
Lombardo?
Here.
Connor? Connor?
Here.
All members are present.
Did we just lose him?
Councilman Neal, we lost your video.
Madam Clerk,
Yes.
it's showing that video. There's no line to video you, but
I'm having a real hard time hearing you. I can't see you anymore.
you can.
Mr. Neal, see if you can use your chat. We're not getting a very good audio or video from you right now.
Are you getting a better audio now?
Yes.
Slightly better, yes.
Okay.
Oh, he just cut out.
Okay. Let's
Oh, there he
give
is.
it a minute for him to come back.
Oh, here he is. I see him.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm using the city cell phone. Just keep kicking off. Apologize for that. If I could get
That's
a motion from a member of the committee that vote be suspended, all council rules that require us or contemplate in-person meetings and in-person voting before conducting any other business.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have, now if I could please get a vote to approve the last Park and Rec meeting minutes from March 9th.
Motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. We have one piece before us today, an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of services for the rehabilitation of Elizabeth Park and keep with the Akron Parks Challenge and declaring emergency. Not sure who's going to speak on this. Is Mr. Hardy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am thrilled to bring this to you today. I'm only going to speak briefly and then kick it over to Bridget and Briscoe from Akron Parks Collaborative, our partner on the Parks Challenge, to go over all of the great work that she's been doing down at Elizabeth Park, and then maybe provide a brief overview of what the community has decided to do, and then take questions. So Bridget, take it away.
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity to talk. We have been working with a pretty large leadership team for Elizabeth Park to determine what should happen down in that area once they receive the Akron Parks Challenge grant. And through online surveys and on-site talking to people, going door to door, reaching out to different groups, we've basically come to several items and a design for the park that includes new basketball backboards. That was big for a lot of the people that we were talking to that were playing basketball. New seating, a nature play area that would be close to the basketball courts. That was something that came up several times concerning safety. Many people bring their children when they play basketball, and having the playground across the street definitely poses some problems. So this was one of our ways to solve that. We're able to fit in 2 pavilions and some walking paths and some staircases to kind of bring everything together and make it accessible.
So with that, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardy. Thank you, Bridget. Any questions from members of committee? Any questions from members of council?
Councilman
Sorry, was that Councilwoman Baylor?
Samples.
That's samples. I know we need them.
Okay. I can't see you on my phone.
Oh, okay.
And so really,
Okay, Councilman Samples.
yes, thank you. It's not really a question. It's just really a comment. Just thanking Bridget and her team for their leadership on this, and all the hard work that she has put forth with that community to move this project forward. Even in the midst of all that is going on around us, they still stayed on task to make sure that this project went forward. And I want to commend you all and thank you for caring about the residents down Elizabeth Park. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. It's been a great community to work with, and we've really formed a great stewardship group through your help, Councilwoman. So we're really looking forward to continuing to work with them to make sure that park is kept up and well loved and well used.
Any other questions regarding this piece of legislation?
I have a comment. I don't have a question.
Mr. Mobian?
I too would like to thank the young lady for the report. What I appreciate so much is the work that you did to reach the citizens, you know, to the point that you were knocking on doors, trying to get input from everybody. And that is much appreciated because, you know, sometimes we hear from a few people and just start things, but it sounds like you made some additional efforts to hear from multiple voices, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal, may I speak?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Connor?
I just want to say, having a past history with the Parks Collaborative and the Parks Challenge, it is one of the most community-led programs I've ever been involved in. The time they spend on the front end, soliciting ideas, engaging the community, and working together really shows on the back end when you give the people what they want in their neighborhood park. Because all parks are different, just as all neighborhoods are different. All those needs are different, and Bridget and her team do a great job in making sure those needs are met, even with regard to staying within budget. It was one of the best collaborative groups I've worked on.
Thank you for that. And luckily we have leaders like you that go out and seek more money when the budget isn't enough. So we're able to do more. So thank you very much. And the other thing I wanted to add in response to really going out and engaging the community, one of the really fun things that we did with this group, because they wanted a nature playground, we sought out some families and had them come to a session where the kids could draw what they wanted. And the adults actually got into that as well, and really talked through what they wanted for their kids and what they felt comfortable with. So we were able to design that piece of the project very specifically with that group too.
Can't hear.
Questions on this piece here? For a favorable report with the suspension of rules.
I'd like to make a motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
I second that.
Give it 1 sec.
Okay, I'm sorry. I see Mr. Lombardo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I
Okay.
second that.
Sorry about that. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. I do have two questions regarding Park and Rec. One in regards to the, and I concur with everybody, the excellent work that Bridget does. Bridget, I did drive by the Cadillac Boulevard project that the Cadillac Boulevard Neighborhood Development Corporation, the application that they won with the First Park Challenge. And I saw some new things installed. Do you know how far away we are from that one being completed?
I do. Thank you for that question. We are requiring the contractor that we're working with to be done by July 1st. So it will be going on soon. And that the thing that you saw there is actually a shadow play flower. We were able to get an additional grant through Summit County Public Health, actually, to put that up as inclusive play. So it's actually a play piece, even though I think it's really pretty.
It is. It is. Again, thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
One last piece is Mr. Hardy.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hardy, just a quick question. I know our summer daycare program is extremely popular. One, because it's extremely affordable. So with everything that's happening with the distancing and COVID piece, and I know if you hear people, daycare is such a critical need right now. Where do we stand with that? How are we handling it? What are our cost factors?
Sure. So it's something that we're still holding out hope that we'll be able to provide this summer in some capacity. Brittany Schmokel, manager for Recreation and Parks, is working with Summit County Public Health right now on a safe reopening plan for the community centers so that we can put that together, get it staffed, and then we get back some sort of normal programming. That said, the summer camps will be starting June 15th, and signups are active right now. I signed my kiddos up. And so we are trying to prioritize, to your point, Councilman, the childcare piece without forgetting, obviously, how we can figure out ways to safely bring back senior groups and others in the community that utilize our rec center. So it's definitely something we're looking at, and certainly the childcare is highest on the list.
Well, thank you. And that being said, again, I know we have to social distance, and I know, Lawton Street had a very large enrollment in the past. Since we have to cut back, one, what does that cutback look like? And then two, since we are cutting back, are we doing something like a lottery system or first come, first serve? Or
That's excellent questions. We don't have answers yet for that. There's no doubt that we'll have to, if we reopen the childcare aspect of our rec program, we're going to have to follow the guidelines that the governor laid out for childcare, which would mean that we would have less spots. But I will get you a better answer than I have today in terms of how we might go about that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, again, thank you, Bridget. We appreciate you and the work that you're doing. Members of Park and Rec Committee or members of council, are there any more questions and concerns regarding anything regarding Park and Rec? If not, if I
Yes,
can-
there is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's hard to see us. Could one of you comment about our playgrounds and parks? Because I understand there's a change. Just got ordered today. Could you explain that change?
Sure.
And also the rationale for it? Because I'm very surprised because the virus hasn't gone away, but there is a change in terms of the parks. Could you explain that?
Sure. So in the governor's announcements last week in regards to entertainment facilities, theaters, et cetera, within that, we followed up on the question of playgrounds, and we received feedback that the governor would not be releasing specific guidelines or recommendations on playgrounds, but asked that we follow the non-contact sport guidelines that are already out and have been out. And in light of that, and in consultation with Summit County Public Health, and again on our safe reopening plan, we decided to open up the playgrounds beginning this Wednesday, June 10th, to coincide with the theaters and other aspects. That said, we're communicating the following 3 points as strongly as humanly possible. First is that social distancing is still something that everyone should be engaging in and being conscious of. Second, if you are sick, it should go without saying, but if you are sick, you should not be at the playgrounds or sending kids to summer camps, etc. And then third is that much like we did before COVID-19, all of our playgrounds are and should be utilized at your own risk, meaning that we will do everything we can per our available funding, staffing, etc., to clean the equipment, but we're being forthright that it's going to be impossible for the city to ensure that every single piece of play equipment is going to be safe 100% of the time from a standpoint of virus and communicable disease. So we are communicating that to all residents, but I will tell you, as many of you have I'm sure heard yourselves, now that the weather is gorgeous, we are getting an incredible amount of families using the playgrounds anyway and tearing down the tapes and things that we have. There's clearly a demand out there. So I think we have to be honest and transparent that, to your point, Councilman, the risk is still ever present, that you are, you and your family are making a decision to go. We're asking you to continue to follow the guidelines laid forth in what I just said, but also in the governor's ongoing releases and orders. But we didn't see at this point there to be a feasible way to keep the playgrounds closed. And we also felt that as testing has started to ramp up, but also as, again, people are using these anyway, it's equally difficult for us to police the playgrounds as it is to make sure that everyone is socially distancing. So there's a large piece of responsibility that all of us as parents and as folks that might use the playgrounds need to take on. But yes, the decision was made to reopen the playgrounds with those caveats starting this Wednesday.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question or a suggestion. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, please.
And I couldn't hear everything you said, Mr. Hardy, but one of the things I would strongly suggest, and I don't know how you do this, but I guess you can do it some way, is just put a posting up at all of our facilities asking the parents and others to take responsibility to wipe down whatever it is that their children are playing on. Because I know when I go to restaurants and all these other places, they are wiping chairs and tables and as soon as someone leaves. So people are going to have to take it upon themselves to make sure they have wipes and different things to wipe down things that their kids are going to be on. Because as soon as one child leaves, they need to be there and do what they need to do to protect their own child. I don't know if that's what you said, but I couldn't hear you real well. But I think we ought to just ask people to take the responsibility to do that. And we can post signs encouraging them to do something like that.
Absolutely. Excellent suggestion. And Mr. Lash is working on that right now with the service department. We will have signage at all of our playgrounds with language that's very consistent with what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're running over into public service. If there aren't any questions or comments regarding anything discussed, if I could get a motion, please, to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
The motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Councilwoman Samples, are you ready to move right into service?
I am.
Okay. All right.
Um,
Thank you.
Seems like all of our
Perfect.
are present.
11:30 on Wednesday, right?
If I could
Okay,
get
right, that's great
motion to
news.
suspend rules relating to meeting in person and voting in person.
Cool, very good.
Motion, committee members, can someone make the motion?
I make a motion that we suspend all rules like that.
Thanks, Phil. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, can I get a motion for approval of our previous in-person meeting minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from previous meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. So we have on our old agenda, Sarah, do I need to speak to this because they're referred in time?
You can just take time on those.
Yeah, items 1, 6, we will 1, 5, and 6, we will take time. Items 2, 3, and 4 have been filed. And on to new legislation. Our first piece coming before us is ordinance ratifying the action of the Director of Public Service without formality of publicly advertising for bids, entering into a contract or contracts with H.M. Miller Construction Company for the emergency repair of the sewer lining under Waterloo Road and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. On Waterloo Road, there's 1,000 feet of 36-inch sanitary sewer that was deemed to have structural defects and considerable inflow and infiltration. We had this in the large diameter project of lining that you passed a while ago, but with working through the documents and the resurfacing project that's currently happening with ODOT on Waterloo Road, we pulled it out of the other project, and we had it basically H.M. Miller has both contracts. They were low bid on the other, but we pulled it out of there to expedite this. So they finished this last week, so the resurfacing could proceed without interruption.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Okay, can I get a motion for suspension of rules with favorable report?
Make a motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Can I get a second?
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those against? Okay. On to our next piece. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into an agreement or legislation with the Ohio Director of Transportation for certain improvements on West Market Street and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlam.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of council. This is about 4 miles of resurfacing on West Market. So the first section is from Main Street, right by the Federal Building, out to Bridge Path, right there at Walgreens and Mustard Seed. And then the other section is where we left off last year, just west of Hawkins. And it goes all the way to the west corp line of West Market out by Revere Road. So this project increased a little bit. ODOT, when they first evaluated the project, they came back and there's considerable amount of curb that needs replaced. So this did go up. This is the second piece. So this is allowing us to enter into the contract with them. We are going to have some inspection on this job, but they are going to perform the work. So they are ready to bid it. The curb and the manhole work will be done this fall. And it looks like the resurfacing won't happen until spring when the asphalt plants open back up.
Okay. It says on the bottom of the document that they're not going to be completed with all the construction until August of 2021.
Well, that's where they leave themselves. So we're hoping they do it in the spring, but yes, they have till then to finish it.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council?
Hello?
Uh-oh.
It is?
Hey, Sharon, you might want to mute yourself. Can I get a motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report?
I have received money for a skills use.
I think
I make a
Brad-
motion. I make a motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
We have a motion from Phil Lombardo. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Brad McKittrick. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Our next piece is ordinance determining to proceed with the improvement of US 224 between the termini of Kelly Avenue and Hillbush Avenue by resurfacing and declaring an emergency. Mr. Lettle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. This is about 2 miles of 224, which is in the city of Akron. Another ODOT project. So this, they are ready to bid. And once they bid and award, this resurfacing should be done later this summer.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? If I can get a motion.
I'll make a motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
On to our next piece. Resolution declaring it necessary to improve various off-street parking facilities in the Kenmore Business District and the Canton Road Business District by sealing, resurfacing, and repairing, painting, parking, space strips, sweeping, removing snow, cleaning sewer openings, providing lawn, turf, shrub, and tree maintenance, litter and other general cleanup, and otherwise improving and maintaining the same in all and where necessary in declaring an emergency. That was a mouthful, Mr. Love.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of council. Yes, this is our annual assessment for off-street parking. And what we do is we perform the work, and this work was completed in 2019. A lot of the things that you mentioned, I won't reread all that. And then we calculate those and then we pass them on the following year. So no increase to the rate of the work that was performed and this actual cost of the work that was performed.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Okay, get a motion?
I'll make a
I move-
motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
Madam Chair,
Yes, is that Councilwoman Amobian?
yes, I have a question.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I'm sorry, this thing is slow. But anyway, Mr. Ludlow, with regard to the Kenmore Boulevard area that was restriped and all of that, what kind of feedback are we getting? I know I've driven down the boulevard many times, and you sometimes have people zipping around you, create another lane that doesn't exist. Have you gotten much feedback from the citizens who live there and travel that boulevard?
We received quite a bit of feedback when we first implemented it last year. Recently, things have settled down. I think people are getting used to it. The business district appreciates the calming of traffic, because when it was 4 lanes, people would, speed through there, but it seems like things have quieted down. We haven't received much feedback at all. And that might be because of, unfortunately, the business have been shut down. But even as it's warmed up and things, and obviously we can't prevent somebody breaking a traffic law and going around you or driving through the parking lane, and that
Sure.
upsets people. But no, lately, I would say in the last 3 or 4 months, we've received very little feedback, negative feedback anyway.
Okay. I see Councilman Freeman on the.
Yes, I would add at the beginning, there was a lot of comments. Obviously, it considerably changed from 4 to 2, but we did have Akron Police Department. They shot radar beforehand multiple times and afterwards, and the speed on Kenmore Boulevard has decreased from 5 to 10 miles an hour. It has really calmed traffic. Some people still are learning, but I think by and large, folks have become accustomed to it being 2 lanes. And I just agree with Mr. Luddle. It really has calmed the traffic flow around there. We have talked with Metro some as of late, perhaps creating a few places where the buses can get out of the lane of traffic to allow passengers to disembark or hop on the bus for their ride. So thus far, I think it's working out real well. Much more walkable now. Crossing Kenmore Boulevard doesn't feel as much like you're taking your life in your hands.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that, any more questions? Okay, so we're on to our last piece, ordinance authorizing the director of public.
I'm sorry. We need to vote on that. Yeah.
I'm moving too fast.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're on to our last piece. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into contracts using Community University Education Purchasing Association, CUE bids, source bids, Omni Public Partners Public Sector bids, or State of Ohio bids, or after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase and or lease of various vehicles and equipment and declaring an emergency. Mr. Brettel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is our annual equipment replacement program, and the CUE was kind of started by Akron U, where they've formed this group where they leverage all the buying power that they can, and they go back, and we typically get about 5% off the manufacturer's price by us and AMHA and neighboring communities all go through this, and we've tried to look at bidding some of these things ourselves, and this is the best way to go. So some of the highlights on this, we're buying in highway, we're getting 3 new 1-tons, which are the smaller trucks that we use for snow and ice for the complaints, where we had 1 in each neighborhood last year. And then we're buying 3 5-ton trucks. We're actually using part of our grant money to purchase those. In street cleaning, we're getting a new flusher truck. We're getting 2 new sweepers. Sanitation, we're getting 3 new packers. In sewer, they're getting a new brick truck for the masons to rebuild inlets. They're getting a vac. Water department's getting a loader. Those are some of the highlights, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council members? Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion for suspension of the rules and a favorable report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it. And I think that is our last piece. And if there's nothing else coming before us, can I get a motion for us to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned from public service.
Thanks, everyone. Councilman Kamer, are you ready to begin public safety?
Yes, Sarah, I am.
Okay. All right.
See. All right, looks like everyone's on the Public Safety Committee is present. So before we move forward, we need to make a motion as a committee to vote and suspend all council rules that require in-person meetings and in-person voting before conducting any other business. Can I get a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Aye.
I have, who made the motion?
Sounded like
Malik.
Mr. Malik. Second.
I have is Malik on the Public Safety Committee?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. All right, so Malik with the motion, a second by McKittrick. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, moving forward. Our last meeting was March 9th. That's been a while, so can I get approval of those minutes, please?
I will make a motion for approval of our previous meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Councilwoman Samples, and I believe Councilman Malik made the second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, moving forward. We do have two new pieces in front of us. Our first piece is a resolution offered by Councilwoman Samples, 2020, urging the City of Akron Police Department to continue its ongoing policies, procedures, and training, which promote officer accountability and instill a greater confidence with the public, urging all state and local law enforcement agencies to adopt similar policies, procedures, and training requirements, and to implement or to continue efforts to end police brutality, condemning law enforcement policies that employ chokeholds or knee to the neck use of force on an individual as a general practice, and declare an emergency. And I believe Councilwoman Samples will speak on this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Kamer. Excuse the noise in the background. They're cutting a tree down outside. Yes, as Councilman Kamer just mentioned in the context of this resolution, this is to not only for us to continue our ongoing practices and procedures here in the city of Akron, but to also encourage other agencies across the state to do the same. As you read through this resolution, we also talk about the mandating of training and continued training, diversity training for new officers and those who've been on the force. But I really want to draw our attention to things being in the height of what we are experiencing now and in this country, are just a couple of things that I really wanted to highlight in this resolution, which I'm sure we all have taken time to read thus far, but where we talk about body worn cameras and making sure that officers body worn cameras on when interacting with the public at all times, not just for the public safety, but for their safety as well. And also making sure law enforcement agencies adopting similar policies and procedures as it relates to racial sensitivity training. And of course, law enforcement agencies should not promote or use chokeholds and placing the knee to the neck on an individual as a general practice. And hoping that I have all of you all support this resolution.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate that. Let's see if we have any committee members that have questions. I'll see if I see any hands. All right, let's see. Malik, Councilman Malik, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I appreciate, Councilwoman Samples bringing this forward, and also, the event on Saturday that a lot of our Black elected officials had the opportunity to, speak to these issues and, often in very personal and very profound ways. And we've heard from so many people over the last few weeks about some of the recent killings and about how we can all do better. I think that, when we look at chokeholds, when we look at body cameras, there's a lot of work to do. I just want to make sure that that this resolution is saying that, a lot of these practices we're doing are great, but there is more work to be done, right? We can always improve our policies, and we ought to, I hope, over the coming weeks and months, put together a dialogue process that allows all these voices to come forward, and then we continue to have proposals. I know there's another proposal we're going to consider in a second, but I hope that we're able to have a process by which we really systematically look and try to improve. Because while I think, I have so much respect, I know we all do, for the work that most of the members of our Akron Police Department do on a daily basis, but I really think this is a moment when we need to do everything we can to make changes. Akron's not immune from the issues every department in the country is facing.
Thank you, Councilman Malik. Good statement. Appreciate that. Anything else? Councilman Swirsky, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I strongly support this resolution. It's a statement of our values. It tells people who we are, what we believe in, where we'd like the direction, where we'd like the city to go. And I appreciate the initiative by those who brought this forward. I think also it was a great rally, Mrs. Samples, on Saturday or Sunday. I'm mixing up. I went to so many, but good job on both those things. And thank you. This is maybe kind of like the opening volley for things we intend to do. And I think Councilwoman Somersville's legislation also would be the follow-up with that will put some teeth into what our intentions are.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. Let me see if there's any other questions or comments from council members. All right, looks like we got everybody. Councilwoman Samples, what's your wishes?
No, I have my hand up. I
where's
didn't.
that?
Councilman Kamer, you have Ginger Baylor is waving her hand, and I can't see Linda though.
All right.
Okay,
Let me go with Councilwoman Ginger Baylor, then I'll go to Linda. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, Linda, go ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
Ginger, go ahead.
Okay.
You're muted. You're still muted, at least on my end.
Okay,
There we
can
go.
you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
That's not even, okay, that's okay. I forgive you. No problem. I just want to echo the comments that Councilman Swirsky said. It was a great put together program that Councilwoman Tara Samples put together for Sunday. And I was just honored to be able to speak to the situation and allow to express some of the ways that, I was feeling that I think others share. So thank you for that, Councilwoman Samples. Also for this initiative, I think that you have captured everything and put it into one nice little piece here in your resolution. And I appreciate that because you're taking in consideration the concern of everyone involved, from our law enforcement all the way down to the citizens. So thank you so much for presenting that. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Ginger. I appreciate that. All right, Linda, you're up
Yes.
next.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. I certainly want to echo the sentiments of everybody's because I really like the fact that Councilwoman Samples has identified particular practices that have no place in this kind of law enforcement. And we saw with our own eyes what happens when these particular practices are overused. And I don't think in any way that we are interfering with the law enforcement officers doing their jobs by identifying things that we shouldn't use, because quite frankly, what we saw is that a way you should even treat an animal. So I really appreciate you identifying these. And then I appreciate the administration responding so quickly with the next piece. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate that. Let me scroll through, make sure no one has their hands up. All right, looks like we're back to you, Councilwoman Samples. What's your pleasure on this?
Thank you, Councilman Kamer. This is so difficult trying to hold a meeting like this. It's crazy. I'm requesting passage.
Okay, all right. So she's actually asking for suspension of the rules. Anybody want to make that motion? Rick Swirsky?
I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules. We pass this evening.
All right, we got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Councilman McKittrick, second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, I'm still want to do a roll call if that's okay, Sarah.
Of course, no problem. Kamer,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Swirsky,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
All right, thanks, everyone. We'll move on to our next piece. This one is an ordinance offered by Mayor and President Margot Somerville. Ordinance amending and supplementing Title III, Administration, Chapter 35, Employment Policies, Section 35.17, Prohibited Public Safety Practices of the Akron Codified Ordinances and declare an emergency. And I believe we have our very own President Margot Somerville with us, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. This ordinance is basically putting into our already existing code that police officers should have a lawful duty to intervene or report unlawful use of force. I think at this point, all of us have had the opportunity to watch the terrifying video of the last 8 minutes and 48 seconds of George Floyd's life with a knee in his neck, surrounded by officers standing by, watching and being silent. This ordinance is saying when you see something, it needs to be mandatory that you say something. And I just kind of want to be very clear, this ordinance is not an attack on Akron police officers or any attempt to discredit the great training that they provide to our officers here in the city of Akron. But just as police officers have a lawful duty to do their jobs, us as legislators, as members of Akron City Council, we too have a lawful duty to do our job. And our job really is to make sure that our codes are very clear, that duties are spelled out, and that consequences are clear, that when officers do not intervene or report, they will be criminally liable. Also in the piece, we have in here retaliation against officers who step up and they report and they intervene. We don't want any retaliation coming back on officers who are doing the right thing. I want to give just a moment of credit and thanks to Chief Ball, because I think on our last call, it was the chief who actually said, that he and other Akron police officers know that what happened in that case with Floyd was completely and totally unacceptable. And so what we're doing now as City Council with this piece is moving forward and actually codifying that and putting that down on paper. I just want to say I'm not asking for a vote on tonight. I want us to be able to have time to ask questions. This piece was really birthed this weekend, just out of response over the last couple of weeks. We've had protests, as a way to let people in the city of Akron know that we hear you, we see you. And I think this is a good first step. I want to come out and say, I want to thank Mayor Horgan. When I came with him with this idea of doing this, the fact that, he was willing to come to the table and to hear me out and to help and be of support of that. So I just want to thank him for that. And again, I hope that, this is something that council collectively, we can come together to do, because again, marching, the protest, that's great, that's wonderful. But now it's time for us as city council members, as legislators, to really do our job and to put forth action that can really produce real change. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
No, before I take any questions or comments, I want to thank you, President Somerville, bringing this forward. But I do got one question for you, and I see we have Ellen Landers-Nish available to speak to. My only question I have is, what about the city as a whole in regards to maybe the Akron Fire Department and any other departments or divisions? Does this pertain to that, or is that something we already have in play?
Ellen, are you prepared to respond to that?
Sure, thank you, Chairman Kamer and President Somerville. So I think the response to that issue would be that I'm not aware of any other city employees who are authorized to use force of any kind. So essentially any force would be an unlawful use of force. So I don't know that other city employees are engaging in situations where they are using force against citizens. But if there's a concern about that, or if there's any research on that subject, I'm sure we would be willing to look at best practices and make sure that we're protecting all of our citizens against any potential unlawful acts.
I think my main question was really in regards to the Akron Fire Department. I know, obviously, I don't visualize them using force or anything, but obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of their jobs when they show up to a med run or anything like that, where before an officer is available, I don't know if they are really hands-on or anything like that. So that's what my mind is going right now in that direction. So.
Yeah, I think we'd definitely be open to looking more into that.
Okay, all right, thanks. Let me see if we have any questions or comments from committee members first. Well, I have a lot of hands up. We'll start with Councilman Sworsky. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Councilwoman Somerville for her leadership on this. We do have a good policy about these kinds of tactics by the police, which is to prohibit them. But this puts some real teeth in our policy. This creates another layer of protection that the citizens, I think, unanimously would support from whatever their background is. We want the police to be peace officers. This is a tool to make sure that that goal happens.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. Next hand I saw was Malik, Councilman Malik, then I'll go to McKittrick.
Thank you very much, and thank you, President Somerville, for bringing in this piece, and Mayor Horgan. I think that this is a response to, some of the main issues that we've heard brought up by folks and by residents thus far, and is a great first step. I think it'd be great whether maybe next week we could have a chance maybe to talk with some of the folks in the police department, and specifically, good to know how this would be implemented in practice. What if the violation, the penalty would be an internal APD penalty? Are we talking about a criminal penalty? And try to flesh that out.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. I saw Brad McKittrick's hand up too. Go ahead.
Just in response, Mr. Chair, to the fire department, the only types of restraints that the fire department would generally use are known as soft restraints, unlike a handcuff or something like that. And they're just to prevent the patients, if they're under the influence of something, drugs or whatever, from injuring themselves. And they're soft in nature, where they would be an item put on their wrists so they wouldn't harm themselves.
Okay, good. I'm glad you touched base on that, Councilman. I was just reading over this and I was thinking about what we could possibly do instead of doing it later on if something happens. So I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let me see if we have any other hands up. Let me scroll through. We got Ginger Baylor. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate your concern about that too, being proactive to see if there were any other entities that may need something like this. So thank you, Councilman Kamer. Also, I'd like to thank our Council President, Margot Somerville, for her immediate action towards this to help everyone. I mean, this is going to safeguard all of us, including the law enforcement officers, the ones that want to stand up and do the right thing. Now, this would give them permission, without consequences, hopefully, even from their colleagues, because we all should want to do what's right. We have a great city here in Akron. We have a great city, and we just want to keep it that way. And like someone said, we want peace officers, but we do want officers who operate at the care of the people. And so we just want people to respect one another and work together for the best resolve, because we don't want to see our city distraught and destroyed in ways that are very chaotic and devastating. So we have a great city. Let's just keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I saw Councilman Mike Freeman's hand up, and actually Ellen too. So go ahead, Mike.
Okay, in looking at the piece of legislation, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in this. One question I did have, Section C, no police officer shall use any chokehold, stranglehold, or neck hold. I'm not sure what a neck hold is. I mean, I could see a police officer getting in a scuffle and maybe having to restrain someone with a headlock and whatnot. So understand chokehold, understand stranglehold. I think we're going to talk about that. Maybe if we could get some more definition on that, but good piece of legislation, and thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that, Councilman. I'll go to Ellen Lander-Nish. I saw your hand up. Go ahead, and you might even be able to talk about that, Mike Freeman.
Thank you, Chairman. So I just wanted an opportunity to speak on behalf of the mayor. He was unable to be at this committee meeting. I know Chief Ball was also unable to be here today, and I'm sure you'll hear from him before this ordinance is voted on. But I think what we're talking about, I just want to make it clear what this ordinance would do. So we're talking about taking behavior that we all already universally say is unacceptable. Chief Ball was on a call last week saying this is a completely unacceptable practice. It's already banned in Akron Police Department procedure. You have to report, you have to intervene. They have that duty. But right now, in internal policy, the consequences of that are disciplinary, right? So that individual could lose their job or face consequences. This ordinance that's before council would make those consequences clearly criminal. So essentially, if you are not the person who is engaging in the conduct, so you are not, let's say, we'll use a stranglehold as an example. You're not the person who's giving the stranglehold to a citizen. You are the officer who's standing by. If there's a legal threshold you have to cover in order to find the officer who's standing by legally liable for the criminal act, whether that's assault or that is some sort of manslaughter if that individual dies. What this ordinance before you would do is create a clear legal duty on behalf of that officer who is witnessing that act to intervene and report. And if that action is not taken, that individual can potentially hold the exact same criminal liability as the individual who did the act. So that's what we're talking about here. It's not about APD policy and procedure. The police department has already had policies in place on this issue for a very long time, long before these issues. They've been proactive on the front, but again, they don't control criminal liability. They only control the disciplinary action they can take against their officers. And what council would be doing would be taking additional step to say, we want to make it clear that this also you could be held liable for criminal consequences as well. So I know Mayor Horgan's supportive of that. I think that, again, this is conduct that we are all saying is unacceptable. We do not expect that of our Akron police officers. We know they are well-trained. We know we have a department that's led by, a high law leadership that holds these values, but this is saying that, God forbid this were to happen in Akron, there's very consequences and people would be held responsible.
Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate you speaking on that. Let's see, anybody else? I see Linda, Councilwoman, go ahead.
I certainly want to comment that this is, although we haven't had a committee meeting in a long time, all of these committee meetings today seem to be productive in doing some very good work. And I certainly appreciate all of this, particularly appreciate this piece of legislation, because what we're talking about is taking swift action so that people know that what we saw in Minneapolis is totally unacceptable in the city of Akron. And I do wholeheartedly believe that most of our police officers believe the same thing. And so I'm appreciative of you bringing this before us, President Somerville and the mayor agreeing with this. But I really like the fact that it was swift and very, very, very clear that you don't see something and not do something when you're standing there watching unacceptable behavior. And whoever tries to retaliate, it is not acceptable and will not be tolerated. So this is great work. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, thank you. Any other questions? Let me see if I have any hands up. All right, Councilman Jeff Fusco. You're still on mute. There you go.
Okay, off now. Thank you so much. No, thank you. Like everyone here, applaud the efforts of the President of Council and Mayor Horrigan, even throughout the last 10, 12 days, and our police department. The supermajority of our officers sign up for the right reasons. And they're there and they know what they're getting into. You know, last week we talked about, you know, like holding the police department, police officers to a higher standard as well as ourselves. And there's a lot to be said with this legislation, memorializing expectations and bringing this forward. And I, again, applaud these efforts. And I respectfully would ask the sponsors if I could add my name to this legislation as well.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Any other questions or comments? All right, we have Councilwoman Ginger Baylor again.
I just wanted to add my name as well to the legislation.
Okay. Writing all that down. I'm sure Sarah's getting that too. All right. Anybody else?
Linda
Mobian.
I personally think that we'll add all of council to this,
Yes.
I hope, and make this president, mayor, council as a whole, because this is so critical and we need to, hopefully after reviewing it, pass it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No, you're right. All right. I'll even let President Somerville know. I know she said something about a week's time, but you know, she can take a few hours to think about it, and I can always poll the committee this evening if we want passage. So that's up to her. She can let me know or something like that. Because I'm okay with that too. You know, this is something that's really important to move forward with. Councilman Swirsky, go ahead.
I just wanted to second Councilwoman Amobian's motion to make it council as a whole.
Okay.
I'm going to ask for the law department's clarification. Will we need to make it council as a whole and vote on that tonight in the council meeting? I don't know that we can do that in a committee meeting.
No, I don't think so. But no, I mean, it's just from past experiences.
Well, whether we do it,
appreciate that.
whether we do it this afternoon or we do it tonight, doesn't matter as long as we do it. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Let's go back to President Somerville real quick.
I actually just want to, thank everybody for their support on this piece. I think all council members, we know how important, how timely this is. And with all of the protests that have been happening around the city, I mean, to me, it is more than appropriate to ask for passage on tonight. So I will definitely, if committee is willing, ask for passage on tonight.
What I'll do, President Somerville, is I'll ask the committee right now if we're done discussing it. I'll ask them what they want to do moving forward, and we'll go from there if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. With that, if I don't have any other questions or comments, let me look. I want to make sure I don't miss no one. All right. So what we'll do is I'm going to ask the committee. It's up to you. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion for report with suspension of the rules.
All right, Councilwoman Samples, and it looks like Councilman Swirsky.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, if you don't mind, Sarah, I would like a roll call, please.
Sure. Kamer,
Aye.
Samples,
Aye.
Swirsky,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Before we adjourn, I just want to say, I think Akron City Council has really good leadership right now, with President Somerville and Jeff Fusco and Swirsky as our leadership team. And I also just want to say, as Public Safety Chair, I really think we have really good public safety personnel out there with the fire department and police department. I know this is tough times right now in this country, in this world. I believe we have a great public safety system. Obviously, we're just going to make it better. And I just want them to know that keep safe, go out there and do the best job you can, and stay positive. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Councilwoman Amobian, are you ready to go into Health and Social Service Committee?
Yes, I am. Can
Okay.
you
Go
do
ahead
roll
when you're
call,
ready.
please?
Sure
Can you do roll call?
Sure. Amobian,
Present.
Freeman,
Present.
Baylor,
Present.
Neal.
Here.
Thank you. Lombardo.
Present.
Okay, all members are present.
May I have a member to make a motion to suspend all council rules that require or contemplate in-person meetings and in-person voting before conducting any other business?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It appears to be unanimous. I don't believe we have anything on the old agenda, and I forget when our last meeting was. Do you have meeting minutes in front of you, Sarah?
I do. You last met on March 9th.
Okay. May I have approval of the last meeting minutes, please?
Motion to approve. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The current piece of legislation, I'll read it in. It says resolution declaring racism as a public health crisis, urging the mayor to create a special task force to develop a 5-year equity and social justice strategic plan, directing the clerk of council to send copies of this resolution to area leaders, community organizations, and the city's representatives serving in the legislatures of the state of Ohio and the United States, and declaring an emergency. Who's going to speak to this?
I'm going to ask if Tamika Rose is on the call, if she can start us off.
Okay.
Thank you, President Somerville. Chairman Amobian, as I spoke last week at City Council, we had intended to bring this resolution forth, and we needed time to make sure that we had it well thought out. And what we have here today is to speak to the fact that we're going to have a special task force develop a 5-year equity and social justice strategic plan. The thought behind this is that we want to make sure that there is adequate funding behind the recommendations that come forth through the strategic plan, and that this is not just about the policing around our city. This is about all of the social and social inequities that we have seen thus far, including what I've been working on since I started in 2017 around infant mortality, housing, education. This is not just about Mayor Horgan. This is about the entire city getting behind him and proving to everyone in the city we have to work together around providing equity for all citizens of the city of Akron and social justice. This cannot just be the city. We can do what we can do. We've started that on procurement. We have began to implement the intercultural development inventory to assess our cultural competence at the cabinet level. And we've done different steps in the police force and the fire department as well. And so I think that at this time, we need to gather the community leaders around to make sure that we have appropriate and adequate housing, education. Everything that we do in this city needs to be equitable and just for all citizens within the city of Akron, especially our Black and Brown citizens. So I will
turn it over to Councilman Samples and President Somerville if they would like to speak to the resolution.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, I just want to stand in full support of this piece. I want to thank Ms. Tamika Rose for her leadership on this. She's done a lot of research in this area, really making sure that the city of Akron does it right. And that's what I appreciate more so. One of the things that I expressed off the bat, I don't want us to have community conversations, have all these people at the table, have all these great ideas, and then we don't have any funding to make those things actually happen. And so I want to thank Tamika. I want to thank Mayor Horgan again for stepping up and making sure that, you know, we will have some resources available to really address this real issue that's happening in our city, which is racism. Again, us as elected officials, we don't have all of the answers, but what we want to be able to do is we want to create the table. We want to bring the appropriate people around the table to help us find real solutions. So thank you. And I'm hoping that all of council will support this. I know that on this evening, Donna Scota will be on the call again, just to really talk about racism really truly being a public health crisis.
And in closing, I'd like to just thank Tamika for her leadership on this. It's one thing to be able to sit and have a conversation with someone about what you believe should happen, and to actually see how she took all of the knowledge that she has, you know, been educated in for years and put that on paper, and to see that this is something that's going to be very, very fruitful and not just on paper. I appreciate you taking your time and getting this right for us as a city, because I think we're on a positive pathway here in the city of Akron. And I thank you for your wisdom and your leadership on this. And I hope that all of council supports this. Thanks.
I have a
Thank
comment.
you.
Are you done, Ms. Samples? Okay.
Yes, I'm
Thank you
done.
very much. We, the city of Akron, I think we're declaring today that racism is a public health crisis. Racism is a driving force of the social determinants of health. Racism persistently influences discrimination in all areas of life: healthcare, housing, education, employment, criminal justice, you name it. What we witnessed on the 25th of May, the murder of George Floyd, was a demonstration of the impact of racism by people in position of power who abuse their authority. So racism is so pervasive and traumatizing through the experiences of Black folks and other ethnic groups. It robs us of our opportunities and our life. It is critical that we look at this and look at ways that we can partner with others who want to build alliances, partnerships. The disparities that we talk about in racial and social justice work, we just have to do something about it. And I think this is a critical opportunity that we have at this time to implement and support policies and practices to end the inequalities in health of people of color. So I'm looking forward to us either having further discussion, hopefully passing this tonight. And I hope we do it with suspension of the rules. Are there any further comments or questions?
Yes, I'd like to say something.
I'm trying.
Can you see me, Linda?
Sir, you might. Sir, go ahead, Ginger.
Okay.
Can you go ahead?
All right. I'm glad. Thank you, Councilman Omobian, for mentioning employment. That is something that weighs heavily on me, because without jobs that give living wages, people, that's pretty much the head of a lot of this. You know, making a living wage reduces a lot of some of the ills that are plaguing our communities today. And I just also want to thank Ms. Rose too for her diligence since she joined the city of Akron. She's been working very hard to bring change in many ways. But I want to ask, are there any short victories that we are embarking upon that people can readily see that change is being implemented in any of these areas?
So I can say that quick wins, but they're just Band-Aids, right?
Okay.
Because they're just Band-Aids because I don't have the push to change everything. So for instance, in housing, for example, for our pregnant moms, we have set up a eviction prevention fund for them at the United Way to make sure that they are not evicted while they're pregnant and giving birth to a newborn child. So that's one of the quick wins that I can say that we're doing. But I think that with this task force, we could actually have a strategic plan around education and workforce. I've talked to Miss Judy Hill this morning, and I've also talked to Teresa LeGrier at the Akron Urban League. So I want to bring all of those, everyone in the community that sits, and including people from the Chamber of Commerce, to talk about what we can and what we do need to do to change and improve the lives of everyone here in the city of Akron.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, Sarah, you may be able to see hands that I don't see. Are there any other comments or questions?
Mike.
Councilman Freeman.
Hi,
I
thank
see your
you.
hands.
Thank you. I know we're just at, and thank you. I want to say thank you to Tamika as well. I think she's been doing a lot of good work that maybe we haven't seen, but it's come to the forefront now. And I know we're just at the resolution portion. Have we begun to discuss funding sources, budgets? I'm probably being premature in that question, but it was something I wanted to ask.
So when in conversations with Mayor Horgan, what we want to do is be very intentional about what we fund. And so we want to see what the committee comes up with and have them bring budgets to us to see where that funding can come from. And then as there, we will work with council and our finance department to see what we can fund and what we can do. So this is over a 5-year term. As I said last week, this did not just happen overnight. This has been a 400-year problem. So it's going to take a time to put it forth. And, you know, with the COVID-19 and all of the other woes that we've experienced, we have to be very thoughtful in what we can change and be very intentional. Of course, I want to change everything, especially I want to have no babies die, right? But we have to be very thoughtful and strategic and put our money where we feel like it needs to go. So that will come in stages.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman
Mr. Skorsky?
Yeah, this is great. This is something I'm really proud to be associated with. This is something I would like to support. One thing would be, I would hope that this task force conducts some public hearings, listening sessions, that they make sure that the task force is responding directly to the needs of citizens. And the second thing I'd like to make sure of is that this task force gives regular reports to the city council in person so that we create some accountability, because sometimes task forces can get a little off track or we never know what happened to them or what they did. But if we really believe in this, we really want this to happen, we need to have the public involved. We also need the task force, which is a great idea, to be very accountable to this city council. And that's something that all of us as city council members could assist on both those things. So with that, I hope, I don't know if it needs to be in the legislation specifically, but those two things I would like to see happen.
Certainly agree with you. Are there any other hands, Sarah, that you can see that I can? I'm using my smartphone because I can't get mine.
Yes, I can see President Somerville's hand, Councilman Fusco, and Councilman Neal.
Okay. Can we go in that order, please?
Sure, absolutely. The only thing that I was just going to say, I think that is very appropriate and very fitting for everything that is happening, that, and I'm sure Councilwoman Samples does not have an issue with this, that we do ask for passage tonight. And I'm hoping that, again, as council collectively, this is something that we can support as council as a whole.
Certainly agree with that. Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Mobian. Everything that's been said is spot on. Thank you to all those who have put forth all this effort to put this together. And the thing I like the most about it is that it defines a clear path. There's a clear path. There's a plan. And I'm sure with the firepower of all those who are going to be involved with this, with the task force, that will have measurable outcomes that we're going to be looking forward to. And so again, thank you all, and we definitely support the passage as well as the council as a whole. Thank you again.
Councilman Neal.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I just want to echo everyone's sentiments. I appreciate this piece of legislation. I do want to stress, though, because I heard that we're waiting for funding and budgets to be able to implement some of this. It is critical for us as legislators, just as we have legislated, brought in legislation to deal with different issues that have been highlighted over these last months to bring in better policy and best practice. That's something we are truly going to address racism as a public health crisis. Remember, we're talking about systemic and structural racism. That means that policies that we've put in place with every good intention of serving our constituents, some of those policies adversely impact certain segments. One that comes to mind is we've had residents come down and talk about how our HEAP policy adversely impacts segments of our population. We need to look at that. We had a policy of tearing down homes when the funding was there. That adversely impacted certain segments of our community. And now we realize that those homes could have been used to house people who are houseless. So I just want to encourage us, we have to put metrics in place as legislators, along with the administration, to audit every area of how we legislate. What do our housing policies look like? What do our policies look out and everywhere? What do our employment? I heard Councilwoman Baylor talk about employment. How when we went through furloughing and laying people off, did we adversely impact a certain segment of our employees? We know that usually is last hired, first fired. So I just want to encourage us that it's critical that we put metrics in place, that we measure every piece of legislation that comes before us in the future so that we can make sure that it is equitable as possible. But we also have to do our due diligence to go back and look at policies in other areas. And then last but not least, one of the landmarks that shows inequity in our city is how our schools do. I think it's critical that we go back and meet with, definitely we have to have conversations with the school board, and we have to have conversations with county legislators. Again, to look at legislation that we've passed that has adversely impact segments of our community. So I appreciate this, but I want to say a lot of what we can address doesn't have to do with budgets. It just has to do with, with our will and commitment to look at policies that we presently have in place that adversely impact segments of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neal. Are there any other council persons wanting to address this issue?
Yes,
Councilman Malik.
Thank you, and thank you to the sponsors of this legislation and Ms. Rose and the administration for all of their efforts. Going off of Councilman Swirsky's question, Ms. Rose, I was just hoping maybe you could speak to the task force. What is sort of the intended makeup of the task force, if that has been discussed, or it sounds like this is going to be sort of broadly focused on all issues, not specifically. Is that right?
So what we're going to do in speaking with Council President Somerville and Mayor Horgan this afternoon, what we're going to do is decide on a number of an overarching council, so to speak, And then that council can then go ahead and have subcommittees, and they will then report back up to the council, and we will review and take on the recommendations in those budgets that those subcommittees then go forward. I want to allow for the community to come to us to see like what is it that they want to do, because I don't want to be the one to say we're going to focus on housing, I know from the research, but what does the community really want us to do?
That's right.
So I
That's
want
right.
to give us some time, and so the mayor said by August we should have a list of the names of those community leaders that we have, and we can bring that back to council in August with and a schedule of when we're going to meet.
Thank you.
Council President Somerville, does that articulate appropriately what we talked about this afternoon?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions by any other council person? Hearing none, may I have a motion from
Motion
a
to
member of the committee?
Motion to adjourn.
No, to pass the
Oh,
legislation
I'm sorry.
with suspension of the rules.
Motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
I need a second.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Would you like a roll call?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Sure. Amobian,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Baylor,
Yes.
Neal,
Aye.
Lombardo.
Yes.
This passes 5-0.
Okay, the motion passes. And I believe that's all we have on our agenda for today. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
So
Is there
moved.
a second? Is there a second? Oh, seconded by Mr. Councilman Neal. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. That's it.